Re-entering society as a formerly incarcerated person or veteran is no easy task, but it can be done. Today, I'd like to welcome up TechCrunch's Henry Picavet, Chris Redlitz of The Last Mile, Kenyatta Leal, also of The Last Mile, Donald Coolidge, and Katherine Webster of VetsinTech.
Thank you. Sit down.
All right. Thank you all for being here. And you all, we're going to change gears here a little bit, I think. We have two very different experiences up on stage to talk about right now. Donald was in the Marine Corps for 8 years, and he was released from service in 2009, remained active when you got back. Kenyatta Leal, he was incarcerated for 18 years, and he was released in 2012. So I'm going to start with you. Kenyatta, can you talk about the months leading up to your release and then the subsequent transition back into the workforce?
Sure. You know, my experience in prison was probably a lot different than most people's. You know, I was incarcerated at the age of 25, sentenced to 25 years to life in prison for being an ex-felon in possession of a firearm. I was in deep denial about the role that I had played in getting myself there. And so I had to go through this process of, you know, taking ownership of what I had done and taking responsibility for the harm I had created in my community. Once I had done that, you know, then I set out on this journey of change and transformation, and probably the most important thing that I did was learn how to ask for help. And once I did that, then I was able to, you know, really start expanding my horizons and, you know, start forging this path forward. And it was through this process that I was introduced to a lot of different people that helped me along the way. And one of those people is sitting here on the panel with us, Mr. Chris Redlitz. He and his wife, Beverly Parenti, they came to San Quentin. I was transferred to San Quentin in 2005. And it was through one of my other mentors that I was introduced to Chris and Bev. They had come with this idea of starting a technology program at San Quentin. And up to that point, I was really kind of like sitting on the sideline, so to speak. You know, I was incarcerated in 1994. I missed the whole little internet takeoff, you know? So I was kind of like sitting on the sideline watching all this happen, wanting to get in the game, but couldn't, obviously because there's no connectivity inside the prison system. When I was introduced to The Last Mile, it kind of gave me an opportunity to get in the game. You know, Chris and Beverly brought, you know, technology to San Quentin, taught us about how technology has changed the way that, you know, that we communicate, the way that businesses operate and compete. And it was just really interesting to me because I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I've always had this hustle about me, but I just used it in the wrong way in the street. And so when I met Chris and Bev, it was just a great opportunity for me to transform my hustle, so to speak, and take things in the right direction. And so we started the program, I think in 2010 it was, and in 2012 we had our demo day, and I graduated from the program then. And I really started thinking about, you know, my future. I mean, once I get out of prison, and I knew that I would get out. I had a life sentence. I didn't know exactly when I was going to get out, but I always believed in my heart that I would be out. So it's all about preparation. How do I prepare myself for this new digital 21st century that I'm looking at? And so I just took advantage of everything that The Last Mile offered me, and you know, it prepared me. You know, I ended up earning an internship at a company called RocketSpace here in San Francisco, and a guy named Duncan Logan took a chance on me. You know, he believed in me, and he gave me an opportunity as an intern at RocketSpace. And with that internship, I've been able to turn that into a sales position where I'm at now. And man, I just really am super passionate about helping create opportunities and pathways for other formerly incarcerated men and women who are getting out.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Donald, what about you? What was it like in the months leading up to your release and transitioning back into the workforce?
Yeah, so I had a pretty amazing experience in the Marine Corps. I also wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for the Marine Corps. I was infantry, be billeted as intel, and I got to do a lot of really amazing things around the world. Not just the typical things you'd think of as an infantry member, but also giving school supplies, water, food to impoverished communities around the world in Senegal, Mozambique, Kuwait, Iraq. I do remember one point sitting in the middle of Al Anbar province. We'd go on long patrols in the middle of the desert, and you'd have a ton of time to sit and think. And that's when your mind just kind of races and races. And there was that point where I just said, well, what the hell am I doing when I get out? And it was at that point where I really made sort of the commitment to myself that I would do everything I could to get back into civilian life in a meaningful way, do a job that had a social good aspect. And I also had a lot of hustle to me, myself. Always had that sort of entrepreneurship spirit. My first business I created was actually in Iraq. And my roommate and I realized that there's these really large troop movements in and out of the base. There's probably 20,000 troops at this base. And what would happen is they would get to the base. They would spend a ton of money on TVs, refrigerators, PlayStation 4s, Rock Band, and then they would be there for 9 months, leave, and they'd throw it all away. So what we did is we actually would go to these troops when they would leave. We'd buy a couple $1,000s worth of TVs and PlayStation 4s for $10 a piece, $20 a piece, and then we'd resell them to the troops that got there instead of going to PX. But when I got out, I wanted to do something great, but I really had no idea what to do, and that's where groups like VetsinTech, which Katherine founded, had a major impact on what I was doing. We had a concept for a toy that could learn and grow with the child using AI to give an evolving experience to that kid as they develop. And we pitched that concept to IBM a couple years ago. We won. We partnered with them to use their Watson technology. And then we faced this sort of, oh shit moment of how do we build this? And started prototyping what we needed to raise capital. Didn't know how to do that. VetsinTech was hosting something called VetCap, which was an initiative out of the White House to help connect veteran entrepreneurs with different types of fund capital, whether it's your more traditional bank loans, angels, or VCs. And we actually nailed one of our first angel investors at that meeting. And then at that same meeting, we connected with Kickstarter, who gave us a ton of help in launching our first Kickstarter campaign. And we, I think, 5x'd our goal of $50,000. We raised $80,000 on day one, and then I think $300,000 in the length of the campaign.
And you also pitched it to a hardware battlefield at CES to TechCrunch last year.
I did. I was shaking so much I could barely demo our toy.
Nobody could tell. So, Katherine, you said that 200,000 vets return from service to the U.S. each year. So you own the company VetsinTech. Why tech?
Why VetsinTech? It was really strange to me that about 5 years ago, we had every affinity group in tech, women in tech and girls in tech, and I even helped launch teens in tech. And we really hadn't been doing, I come from a military family, so, and I've been in tech all of my life. And so it probably, having that military background, I kind of questioned seeing the returning veterans, and they said they couldn't get a job. And I thought, that's crazy, because anybody who's 20-something is raised on tech, right? Social, mobile, games. And now all the new technology that's in the military, there are at least 10 new technologies that are that have been used in the last war, the current war, Iraq and Afghanistan, from GPS, night vision, social media, IT, precision strike capability, robots, cyber, drones. So I think, we have this whole new generation, and the fact that we weren't connecting them to the tech ecosystem was just a shame. So I went to somebody that I've known from way back in the tech industry, Craig Newmark, founder of Craigslist, who now is my co-founder, and asked him if he would help me sponsor a hackathon, what all the cool kids were doing, and 5 years ago. And so we did our very first hackathon for the veterans. It was amazing. They came out from Stanford, from Berkeley, from every local college, a lot of student veterans. And the veterans said, please do more of this. the only thing we ever get invited to are really lame career fairs. And it was just a shame and you know that very well. So we did that, and from there, VetsinTech was started.
And Chris, similarly in prisons, you've taken the last mile, and it didn't start out as a strictly coding program. It started out as an entrepreneurial program. But why does something like that work in prisons?
Well, I was never involved in any kind of sort of social impact. I had no experience in criminal justice, or I'd never been in a prison before. I run a venture capital firm here in San Francisco, and a friend of mine, as Kenyatta mentioned, was mentoring in San Quentin. And she invited me to do a talk to some guys that were really very hungry to understand about entrepreneurship and starting businesses and so forth. And my first answer was, no, I'm not interested. But she was persistent, and I relented, and I went out one evening. And I was prepared to do my thing, leave, and that was sort of checking the box of my social impact for my life. And what I found was, in this packed group of guys, that there was this look in their eyes that we see in founders that we fund. But it was like 10x. These guys had so much desire and passion, and they wanted to create a better life after they served their time. Guys were handing me business plans. It just blew me away. Like, I thought everybody in prison was beyond hope. And what I realized, that people were looking for an avenue for hope. And that night was really the thing that changed my whole perception. I literally got in my car, I drove home, and walked in the door, and Beverly greeted me. She's my wife, and also we've been business partners, and as Katherine knows, because we've all known each other for about 20 years. And I said, Beverly, we're going to start a technology incubator inside San Quentin. Right?
Right on.
And she said, Chris, no effing way am I going into prison. And that was really the start of it. So that light bulb went off. I knew nothing about recidivism rates, cost of incarceration, nothing. But we did our homework. I invited Beverly to go back in with me and meet some of the guys. One of the first guys we met was Kenyatta. And Kenyatta, as he said, was serving a life sentence. He was serving a 25 to life sentence under 3 strikes with no light at the end of the tunnel. He was prepared to die in prison. And he was one of the most positive guys I had ever met. Like this zest for life. And I'm like, how does this happen in prison? So we actually started an entrepreneurship program. Kenyatta was kind of the guy that we built it around. We started with 5 guys. And that was in 2010. We did that for 4 years. 3 years ago, we started a technology training program. We're actually teaching coding in prison. And we were looking for space in San Quentin. And there's a big metal door, which you went through, because you went to demo day. And on the other side are prison industries. And there's all these warehouse, high ceiling kind of things, almost looked like lofts in Soma. And I walked in, it's the old print factory, it had been dormant for 8 years. It's 22,000 square feet, and I said, I want this building. They said, what are you talking about? I said, we're going to build a technology incubator here in this building. And in about 4 months, it'll be open. It'll be completely wireless, power upgrade, new roof. The state has now given us a grant for $4 million to redo this. And this will be the pilot and the template that we can take across the country. It'll be able to manage about 200 guys at one time. And this is really, for us, the flagship. We're in 5 prisons now. We'll probably be in 7 in California in the spring. And these guys are learning technology. We actually have 2 of our graduates out here.
Let's stand up for us. Right over there.
There you go. Both Chris and Lucius never touched a keyboard before. Chris served 17 years, got out a month ago in 3 days. Lucius, April 12th. And they're in our project right now. We're building a learning management system that's been contracted by the state, that the state wants this LMS to use across statewide, and those guys are on the team, so I'm real proud of them.
Would you talk? Yeah. Chris, really quick, could you tell the audience the relationships with tech that you have? Airbnb is one of them. right?
Yeah, well, actually, Maxine came in with Mark Zuckerberg in the fall of, I don't know if Maxine's still here or not, but Mark came in the fall of 2014. We've had such great support. We've had support from Slack. I'm wearing my Slack socks right now. But Slack, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Microsoft, Adobe, and on and on. Airbnb, we did a project for Airbnb. Chris was on that team where we actually built a social media dashboard. Remember, we don't have connectivity directly to the desktop to the guys. We have connectivity to the facility, but these guys build a social media dashboard. They use it at Airbnb every day now, and they built it without connectivity. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Kenyatta, when I spoke with you a couple of weeks ago, you talked about this moment early on. I think it was within the first 5 years. You said if you got out, when you got out, you were never coming back. Now, recidivism rates are abominable in this country. In California, they're hover around between 55 and 60%.
That's right.
And that's insane. So how do you, with a 25-year life sentence under 3 strikes, how do you have that thought? And then how do you live every day with that thought and honor yourself and try to make sure you don't come back when you get out?
That's a great question. And, you know, getting out and staying out are two completely different things. You know, having that stay out mentality is something that I really focused on. And there's no way that I could have done it myself. You know, my best thinking, my greatest plans and all that stuff led me to prison with a life sentence. And so, you know, I had to shut up and listen, basically, you know, and really start just being receptive to learning new things. And I had a mentor, his name was David Lewis. He's from East Palo Alto. He was murdered, I think, several years ago, but he used to come into San Quentin after he got out and volunteer his time. And he told me, Kenyatta, you know what? If you change the way you think, you can change the way you act and get a different result out of life. He's like, take a look at your life right now. Look at the results. Are you experiencing more consequences or rewards? And I had to be honest, man, I was experiencing the worst consequences ever. You know, so I had to go back to the drawing board and really look at my life and think about the choices that I was making. Every single choice makes a difference. You know, and in prison is a really hostile and violent environment. You know, there are a lot of people that are thinking about their choices. They really have given up. And so every day I was, you know, surrounded by the alternative. If I don't have hope, if I don't keep trying to swim, you know, I can sink and I can be like all the rest of these guys that are walking around the yard, defeated. I don't want to be that. I've always been a fighter. I've always been a survivor. So, you know, I just tapped into that at a really, you know, just deep level inside my gut and just followed it. You know, there's no playbook for that. You know, you can't Google that. You know, you can't Google how do you make it through life sentence. You can't do that. And so I had to just like glean as much information as I could, you know, do the things that I knew that were right and just take it one step at a time. And I made it.
So Don, you're the CEO of a successful company called Elemental Path. What are your outreach principles like? Do you seek vets? Do you try to work with military at all to try to bring vets into your fold?
Yeah, Elemental Path has been successful so far. We hope that continues. We have a team of about maybe 15 employees. 3 of them are vets. And what I actively cultivate relationships with young veterans. I provide mentorship to vets getting out of the service, vets that want to come into the Marine Corps. And that network's always been really strong for me. That's probably the only network I had when I first became a tech co-founder. I don't code. I really had no reason to be in the tech industry, and just really learned by jumping in. But got a lot of mentorship from other vets. It's a really strong network, and then I continue to give back to that. What I like about hiring veterans is you can typically throw them in and they'll figure it out. So they're really good at making decisions with very little information. That's sort of what we're taught to do. And in a startup environment, that's really, really helpful. Just recently, our head of customer support, who's a veteran, actually served in my unit. I asked him to create a chatbot to automate our customer service, and he's never coded in his life. And he looked at me a little funny, and then 2 weeks later, he had the chatbot up and running. So I feel really, really comfortable with being able to take and throw those veterans into really uncomfortable situations and get a pretty decent end result.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to a question I have for Katherine about training. So you had just said that military personnel are trained very well to serve our country, but they're not prepared very well to come back when their service is over. So first of all, why? And then second, what do companies like VetsinTech or others like it, what can they do to affect that kind of change or work with the military or something like that?
Yeah, right. It was really surprising to me when I decided to do that first hackathon to try to find the vets. And the DoD really just kind of says, bye-bye. Here's the VA, and that's it. So it really is amazing what we've done by just recognizing them with all the qualities they have, the leadership, the work ethic, the ability to work across teams and across cultures, and communication skills. So they bring this amazing skill already to the workforce. So they just needed a little connecting to the tech ecosystem. So all the companies Chris mentioned are also working with VetsinTech and 5 or 6 more. And what we're seeing now is just by providing education, we train them in cybersecurity, which is natural fit, Salesforce, web development, and a whole bunch of entrepreneur programs. The one that Donald came to, VetCap, Capital for Veterans, was launched out of the White House to support veteran entrepreneurs. And out of 10 programs that day, ours was the only one that saw the light of day. It really takes a VC, an angel, corp dev, crowdfunding, and venture debt, and the SBA all side by side, and said, when do you come to me for funding? And that's how we ended up getting Donald recognized on his Kickstarter campaign. And so we focus on education, employment, and entrepreneurship, 3 E's. We're in 14 chapters across the country, and all of those programs are helping them just get connected to the tech ecosystem. Donald was also leading our New York chapter, and which is one of our second largest, really.
What I think often happens with vets is, they do their 4 years, maybe more. They don't really realize the opportunity they have to make an impact in businesses outside of, say, criminal justice, law enforcement, or policing. They think their service pigeonholes them into those types of jobs. And what VetsinTech does is it helps get veterans familiar with companies that are looking to hire vets with skills or entrepreneurs with skills in leadership, being able to think on their feet, act quickly, and actually connect that bridge between the two.
We have 1 minute left, and there's a question that somebody has posed that Christine is now going to read.
The good news is there's only one question. So this question is either for Kenyatta or Chris, but will women in prison also have access to these amazing opportunities?
Great question.
They do today, actually. We launched a program at Folsom Women's Prison. It's about a year ago, I believe. Natrina Gandana, who's in our staff, she actually leads that effort. We have, I think it's 18 students there. We're actually opening in a prison in Chino, about an hour east of LA, called CIW. That's also a women's prison. So it's absolutely, we're looking at diversity of culture, diversity of gender, and I just mentioned this big door that again, you walk through to get to our facility. Prisons are very segregated, and it was our mission to not only teach business and teach technology, but to teach how the real world should operate. So when all of our guys walk through that door, they leave all prejudice behind. Prison yards are segregated, white guys here, Asian guys here, Hispanic guys here. In our classroom, we do pair programming. You have an ex-skinhead and an ex-gang member sitting next to each other, and they're pair programming together. It's really amazing. These guys would have killed each other on the outside, but we consciously make sure that every ethnicity is always represented. So it's important that we focus on women and men, but it's even more important that people that come out of prison know that they can operate together, and they almost become beacon of hope for others, that let's operate like we should, and let's leave segregation behind.
Yeah, well, I know, for one, I'm sure everybody up on this stage, everybody in this auditorium would love to see programs like this in every single prison across the country. Hopefully that kind of expansion can happen.
That's our goal.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, it's, we're out of time, but it's lunchtime. So thank you. And thank you.